2 years ago at this point. And I used to listen to a lot of podcasts. I don't so much anymore because I had to graduate between then and now. But I was listening to a podcast called The Anthropocene Reviewed. It's by John Green, the guy who wrote Fault in Our Stars. And the podcast talks about different events and cultural it talks about aspects of the human experience and rates them on a 1 to 5 scale. And it's a great podcast. You should check it out. But one of the episodes was about Lascaux. And as part of the exploration, the essay on Lascaux, they told the story of the discovery about how 4 teenage boys found a cave full of Paleolithic art in the middle of the woods in World War II France. And it was only just one sentence, but it was like an offhand mention that 2 of the boys came back to guard the cave the winter after they found it. And that caught my attention I was fascinated by that idea. And I was like, I wonder what we talked about. I should write a play about that. Why not? And I didn't take it very seriously at first, unfortunately. But as I kind of sat with the idea, and the more I thought upon it, the more I thought about what brings a person to do this frankly crazy thing in the middle of Nazi-occupied France to stay out here in the dead of winter. Why would they do this? And that kind of was what part of drove my exploration as I started to write the first scenes of the play.
And if y'all haven't done any independent exploration of the history around Lascaux, it is like trying to chase mice that aren't real.
Oh my gosh,
because the facts, the ages are a mystery. Whether or not it was about Robot the dog is a mystery.
Every account tells it in a unique way. It's so different, and so there was a lot of synthesizing that was done in the construction of the play.
I think a lot of us are also wondering what some of the most exciting discoveries have been for you as we've, done this production process, brought in new minds, brought in new collaborators. What's been an exciting moment or discovery?
Yeah, I think the biggest discovery that has happened with this script, and it might not sound very big to y'all, but it was huge for me. Originally, I had written a monologue for Mark. That was the end of the show. Where we now have a monologue for Jack, it was originally Mark speaking. And it became clearer and clearer over time working with the development team, with Abby and PK, that wasn't necessarily the right choice. Thematically, it made more sense to have our youngest, most passionate voice be the final speaker, and structurally, it made more sense to me, and so it kind of was it marked a shift in priority, I think, when it came to how I was writing the play, what aspects of the story I wanted to emphasize, because I think Mark's version of the end of the show was very reverent, whereas Jack's is very hopeful. And that hope was something very important to me that I learned was important to me over the course of this process. Also, it's way funnier than I thought it was. Also, this is a really funny show. At least I think so. And it was funnier than even I thought it was. So.
And with that, discovering new things, what are some things that you were excited to keep exploring as you continue writing this play, continue the play?
Absolutely. So I feel very lucky to be in the position of, well, even just on our final drafts, I was taking notes of all right, what are things that I want to look at changing going into the future about this version of the script. And I felt so relieved that most of them were just so nitpicky. It was a word or choice here, a word there, maybe these scenes need to be reorganized a little bit, but mostly what I learned was that the script is in a really solid spot. And so the plans moving forward with the script are kind of taking in that, like, those small adjustments, making those edits, creating a post-production draft. And then once that is finalized, I think it's time to start, like, conferencing with the play, like submitting it to, like, development conferences, and those happen all across the country. You know, and who knows if I get accepted to any, but that's kind of the immediate term future for the play, and who knows where it goes from there.
In that same vein, what is next for you as an artist?
What's next for me? I guess I kind of already answered that question in regards to the play. So sorry for jumping the gun there. But next for me as an artist, it's finishing up this script, and well, I've already got ideas to work on the next one. It's reading. So if any of you like The Myth of Icarus, you'll be really interested in my next project. You are good at that. Yeah.
Well, thank you. These are the questions that I have preloaded, so to speak. So now is the time we open it up to the audience. Anyone has a question? We'll just take a few.
Yeah, sure. This is, I guess this sort of applies to dramaturgy, but I'd like to hear from you. So, were there any challenges like associated with writing 1940s French people as an American? Are there any like adjustments you made to the dialogue or the story or anything like that to really kind of put it in a time and place? Because I feel like this is a very, obviously it's called Lascaux, so it's very set in a time and place. So.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. So this play is based on very real, very historical events. And I knew going in, since the actual technical accounts of the discovery are so spotty and inconsistent, I felt that it would be best to try to make it my own, to create a fictionalization based on the event, rather than trying to create a true account. And to that end, I felt it was appropriate to try to create space between what you saw in the room today and what actually happened. And part of that happened in the language. I anglicized the names, I made them more comfortable for our English-speaking mouths. And more to that end, in my mind, Jack and Mark are speaking their modern colloquial language, what is modern and colloquial to them. And so, in my mind, it only feels appropriate to have them speak the modern colloquial language of us in the room. And that helps in creating that distance. And so that's kind of the guiding thought behind that, if that answers your question.
Yeah, great, thank you.
If anyone's curious, the original boys' names are Marcel, Jacques, Simon, and
Georges. I don't know how you it's just George with a French accent.
Another question? I saw you thinking.
Avery, I had the privilege of reading this in its earlier incarnations, and one of the things that I remember striking me about your script was the way that time flowed. I think this is a play that explores time and the passage of time. What discoveries did you make in the room about the things that you've been scripted about time? Because I remember the scenes being, in my mind, quote unquote, out of order, but in some ways the way that I sensed the play in its passing was chronological in my sensation of it. So what discoveries did you make when you had to put the production had to put bodies to the characters and track all the props and create the passage of time on the stage?
Yeah, the question of time has been one that plagued our development team for several months prior to rehearsals starting. And by several, I mean 2, but that's it. That counts in my mind. But yeah, originally time was this kind of disjointed thing. It felt several and separate. In a way that over the course of development project, like over the course of the development, we found that it's not so much the question of like how much time passes between each scene. That is the particular question. It is more the sense of timelessness that matters, if that makes sense. It felt like we were pursuing this idea of a perpetual moment, was where our target for time ended up landing, rather than these like disparate, unconnected scenes. We started to like stitch them together into more of a quilt of scenes, which unfortunately, due to the restrictions of bodies and space and reality, we had to present in a order. But yeah, time has gone from like a broken mirror to I had somewhere I was going to go with this analogy. It's not broken anymore, I guess. So I hope that.
Yes.
Okay. Of course.
I'm yapping a lot though, sorry. I wanted to offer something.
Oh, please.
Sorry, I'm making it about me. Just, you had this thing that you said early on in the development process, and we've been saying this thing, it's kind of come as a joke, that it's a quiet and contemplative play, and a lot of you may have experienced that, and that the scenes are like walking through the cave itself, and that you don't know when each of the drawings was made, you don't know what order the drawings are made, there's a bull in front of a horse, in front of a cat, who knows, but it's up to you to sort of look at that, take it all in, and order it yourself, and what is most meaningful to you. You said that in the rehearsal room, and I was like, dang! So, other questions?
Hi, I'm writing on my homework sheet as well. I was wondering what the very end moment kind of meant, because I love James's monologue a lot, and I felt that the moment when Jack and Mark like met at the end, I wasn't sure what that was trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's partially, I think, unfortunately, our director, Morgan Seymour, is not in the room with us today. But to my sensibility, in my perspective on that, it is, the ending moment, in my mind, emulates the moment of discovery of the cave. It is how I perceive it, how I attribute meaning there is we get a glimpse of the joy and elation of finding this thing for the first time, of witnessing its beauty for the first time, and celebrating its existence at all, is what I see in the evening.
Yes. So, how did you? Where did the idea come from to characterize Mark and Jack the way you did? Is that just based off what you learned about them? You see, like, the mechanic and what intellectually education that Jack had, but like, what kind of steered you that way? Like, to keep going with that kind of track.
Yeah, so characterization absolutely started in like the basic facts of the history. Mark is a mechanic. Jack was a student whose teacher, Monsieur Laval, was the only school teacher in the village of Montignac. And from there, it's kind of just been this like having had 2 years to sit with them and really get to know them. And one of the first big building blocks of that was actually at your recommendation, Dr. Z, was to write the monologues. Mark's opening monologue for the play was actually what I initially started as like a characterization tool of like, hey Mark, why are you here? And the same with Jack's first monologue was, hey Jack, why are you here? And that was kind of my first in to the characters. Before writing those, it felt obtuse and abstract, and it wasn't quite clicking. But once I did that exploration in writing those monologues, it really started falling into place. And it just kind of became like, oh, I know who these people are now. can just see what they're doing and write it down. Okay, I can't see.
So, comment and then I feel like, and I don't see a lot of theater, especially a lot of small theater, but of the theater that I have seen, I feel like this play encapsulated the beauty and trying times kind of idea better than some that have massive production value. And I think that was really massive. One thing that I do want to ask is, I really latched on to the idea of the upside down chorus, and I was upset that I didn't see it in the drawing.
It is one of the more interesting pieces of art, and one of the more interesting figures at Lascaux.
If anyone wants to donate a second projector.
Yeah.
But if you go on to, if you look up Lascaux, they have a virtual tour.
Yes.
You can't visit the actual caves anymore. Too many of us went into the caves and then mold started like sporing and destroying some of the artwork. But they have several perfect replicas of Lascaux that you can visit. But if you don't want to go to France, there is an online version. Is like one of the first things you see, and it's perfectly exactly what the characters react to it as. They're like, yeah, what the fuck is up with that? So I would really recommend that because it is a favorite. Thank you for your comments.
Hi. There's a lot of like conditioning forces put upon the characters in the play, like the cold and the darkness and the fear and the pain and the hunger, and I wonder what you think is the most important of those forces or not the most important, but what you feel is, well, yeah, I guess the most important. What you feel is most important to be put upon these characters for the audience to understand the play, which, like, the fear, the hunger, the cold.
That's a really tough question. Oh, goodness. That's a great question. Thank you.
Do you want me to spend time while you?
Yeah, I guess if you have something to say, you're welcome to. Oh, goodness.
I remember you saying a lot about the grief in the play. That sort of, grief about Simon, grief about France, grief about, Jack even says, our youth, our sovereignty, like being forced to grow up. And I remember you talking about in the production room, like, the grief is always there and it pushes upon them, but it also pushes them forward. This religious experience of being in the cave ties them there. Sometimes they don't know why. And I think their grief is intertwined with that.
It's a really excellent argument. So I don't speak to disprove what PK says, for PK is an honorable man. Sorry. I think I agree with PK in the sense that I think the physical conditions are perhaps the least important. And not to say that they aren't important. I think all of it's important, otherwise I wouldn't have written about it. And I say that with love because you're my buddy. But I think in addition to that excellent argument you had about the grief of Simon and France and all that, and everything, I think not to center it, but the fear of reprisal, the fear of the very real harm that the Nazi regime placed upon the people of France, I think that is most key to understanding why the boys act the way they do. If that answers your question.
It does, thank you.
Absolutely.
Other questions?
He hasn't gone. You take him.
Killer.
I have kind of an unusual question. When you were writing this, what software did you use to write it? Just sheer curiosity.
Google Docs. Very basic, accessible Google Docs. So it's very important that I can also write on my phone if I needed to. And so I use Google Docs because I'm not going to screw with Microsoft sharing software because it sucks. And Bill Gates can fight me on that. But yeah, I used Google Docs, and to kind of elaborate more on the direction your question was heading, part of what allowed me to organize my thoughts about this play was this structure I created for myself in vignette starts with, I called them vignettes in my brain more than I called them scenes. They were windows into the lives of Mark and Jack, so they were vignettes to me in my mind. Each vignette began with this kind of action of life, and it ended in a moment of silence. And that kind of pattern, I think, both informed rhythm in the play, and also it was nice to have like a little like scene number, stage directions, line, moment of silence that I could just kind of copy paste as my like little template for a scene. And I guess Google Docs made that really easy. Google Docs.
Plus the spreadsheet of doom.
Oh, and the spreadsheet of doom. So the fun part, so if you don't mind me going on a little tangent, the fun part about this play was that I wrote all of the scenes out of order. Which was kind of where Doug's comment was coming from. The scenes were written in the order of, I had the idea, so I wrote the scene. And then I had to put them together into a play. And it was a nightmare jigsaw puzzle I would not wish upon my worst enemy. And to that end, the spreadsheet of doom was created, which archived every vignette, its place in the original written order, what the scene was about, what like it talked about, what through lines it had, what it commented on, had all of that. And then separately, I had here's the current order in my, in the latest draft. And it had its own numbers with different scene titles, with different, oh my God. PK can tell you the breakdown I had trying to get everything in order for script block for this production. It was an extended affair. And that was on Google Sheets.
I was just gonna ask, is there a particular moment of like a depiction of character or like a character development that you think you really enjoyed writing?
My favorite line in the play, to that end, it's Mark's line when, after he's like, no, you don't touch the gun, Jack. It's not for the animals, the wildlife, anyways. And that's my favorite line in the play that I felt really clever writing. You'll pardon me pulling back the curtain and feeling like a human for a second. It was kind of this, it was in writing that line that I discovered what Mark's like stance on authoritarianism and like fascism and the people who carry out fascism is. And it was like this like, oh, I wrote that. Oh, I wrote that. Oh, I wrote that. Which I both greatly enjoyed and thought was incredibly telling about the character.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Izzy?
I'm just curious, what was the first scene, or like when you sat down to start this play, what was the first scene you wrote? And like, is it still in the play today?
Oh.
If you know, I guess.
I do know. It was cut for the final copy of the script. It was a real short scene of Jack and Mark just kind of sitting, hanging out, and they hear a branch snap in the distance. And Jack was like, oh my gosh, what was that? And Mark was like, it was probably just like an animal or something, like a rabbit or a fox. And Jack was like, are you sure? What if it's a Nazi? And Mark's like, couldn't really do much if it was. But, you know, like, we're here to protect it from like vandalism and stuff. Like vandals and thieves, I think was the line. And Jack says, you say that like they're any different in reference to the Nazis. And Mark ended the scene by saying, oh, those people are different, just ask Simon. And that was originally the opening scene of the play. It was the first scene I wrote. But as we were working on it in the rehearsal room, I guess this is another major discovery, we decided to replace that scene with the scene you saw start the show today. Originally, that scene happened later in the script, but we just kind of realized both energistically and rhythmically that the scene you saw open today was the better fit. And so the first one had to go, unfortunately.
She exists with us somewhere.
Yeah, I was.
She's still on the
Yeah,
spreadsheet.
I was. Well, and I was gonna say, I feel like there are elements of that scene all throughout the play as well.
Right.
So we didn't. The
It
spirit,
was
the
redundant.
spirit's there.
Yeah, yeah.
I haven't looked at the side as much, I'm sorry.
It was good.
Okay, Laura?
One more question. There are a lot of really beautiful quiet moments in this play, and I was wondering which one was your favorite in the sense of script and stage directions that you were able to create?
I think out of all of them putting Simon's jacket back where they found it was, it is perhaps one of the most meaningful moments of silence in the play, in my perspective. And it was, I don't know, it just kind of really hurt to write, in the best way, of course, but I think that's, if you're going to talk about like what are the moments that define Lascaux, I think that's one of them. If that answers your question.
I just heard Morgan's brain from wherever he is. Morgan's our director. And he, just to hype you up a little, he is obsessed with this one stage direction. And it's in the Merry Christmas Jack scene. And I think it comes between those two lines where Jack turns to Mark, eyes sparkling. Merry Christmas.
It's a line descriptor. It's the line descriptor. It's like Jack, I sparkling. Merry Christmas, Mark.
I love that one too.
Any lingering questions?
I kind of have one.
Yeah.
So I really like how the short scenes like kind of contrast with like the cave's artwork and like the passage of time. But that was really interesting. But I have to ask, what was in the sketch? I know it was smart drawing, cave drawings and everything, but what's in the sketch?
So go ahead. Yeah, let's see the sketchbook, I suppose. It's in my mind, in the Mind Palace version of the play, it's various sketches of like sites around the town, like around the town of Montagnac where they live, around sketches of the art in the cave. There's obviously the portrait of Elaine. And we've kind of discovered in the rehearsal room that over the course of the show, Mark begins to draw this like view Jack describes on the postcard his dad sent him of the Greek island. Is one of the things we found in the room. But
Hey, which reminds me, mixed dramaturg,
there's that problem.
was color photography a thing in the 40s?
We looked it up.
Nice.
That earliest color photo I could find is from 1937, so it's not like super old, but it is not.
So Jack's family is special.
Do the ones that you draw during the show?
Yeah.
Like this one?
I do those.
You can draw.
I didn't know you had a show. Oh my gosh.
That's beautiful, Ariel.
The crisp sales.
Your very masterful artist.
I could never actually see it in the. It's so dark I can't even see it, and I always pretend to see
I think
it.
this art gallery, I think possibly our Q&A is drawn to a close. Do you want to say anything before we talk?
Thank you guys for coming. We've been through the cohorts. It couldn't have happened without them.
If you haven't filled it out already, please fill out your feedback form. Use the back if you want comments to put on the back too. And you can drop them off with Al at the front office. Or Izzy. There's also a lobby display. If you have not chopped your hand onto the wall.
Put your hand on the wall, you have chocolate.
During the show, and I had to catch up on their set list.
No, I get you. Also, when I saw Dance Nation, your work was fucking incredible. That show was done. I haven't talked to you about it.
You did already spoke to we made two. Yeah. We made a pesto squash melody.
That was their color. Let's go with it.
Roasted garlic.
1937.
Did they have to come in on book?
As much as they could.
Going down to